Hello and welcome to Media 7. In this week's program, we look at the shapes we throw in the media. In the age of Photoshop and Botox, are we inviting young women and men to subscribe to unattainable images? And what to make of editors who are saying no more? Also, later in the show, I'll talk to Bill Francis as the radio network's main man in talk radio begins to wind down a 45-year broadcasting career. But first, let's look across the Tasman, where it's all about the body image. You could, if you were so minded, see the promo for this year's season of Australia's Next Top Model as kind of creepy. Gorgeous young women stride around with their long legs and flat tummies only to be erased and flattened and objectified by a smirking lady Svengali. But it's okay, because the lady Svengali, Sarah Murdoch, has appeared on the magazine cover with the benefit of lighting, makeup and God's own cheekbones, but no Photoshop. Suddenly, in Australia, body image is serious government business. There was the glossy magazine editor turned government advisor, who now wants the media reined in.
We have a duty to support young people and to encourage them to achieve their full potential, regardless of their weight, height, shape or skin colour.
And the government minister.
Negative body image is not just some teenage passing fad. It's something to take seriously.
And completing the set of gorgeous women having a hand-wringing contest, Sarah Murdoch herself with that magazine cover.
And I really applaud the editor actually for taking this on board and agreeing with some resistance within her office, but agreeing to have the first completely undigitally enhanced cover of the magazine.
The gloss came off a bit when the weekly's editor revealed that Murdoch initially didn't want to go Photoshop free.
There, wrinkles and all.
But the issue of unrealistic media images has been all over the news lately. When bloggers responded with a WTF to this absurd photoshopped image, Ralph Lauren tried to take them down with a copyright claim. And then it emerged that the model had already been fired by Lauren for, apparently, being too fat. But we don't need slightly creepy sweatshop using fashion kings for such messaging. It was on New Zealand's top model that Ruby Higgins was told she was too fat.
It was interesting because I actually didn't not fit into any of the clothes.
Just as well she's smart and talented then. Some companies, like Dove, make a virtue of positive body image. But they're still selling beauty soap, aren't they? And why is the issue always framed around weight and not any other way of being different? Joining me now are new Next magazine editor, Christina Wickstead, entertainer and doyen of the celebrity pages, Jo Cotton, and New Zealand Herald columnist, Tracy Barnett. Welcome to you all, ladies. Christina, was I being too cynical there in that setup?
Not at all. I think it's really important for you to analyse it, and I think that's what this is all about. It's the same as the moment in time when, sadly, we lost Diana. We have to think about the process of the media, and the best thing that's come about from this is people are thinking.
I hadn't thought about it in terms of the death of Lady Di, but...
Very similar.
Let's get this clear. Is photoshopping, especially of celebrities, now the rule in the magazine trade?
It would be very much the norm that a celebrity would be asking us if we were putting her on the cover. She'd be asking us before she agreed, will we be photoshopped? What's interesting is, depending on the sort of celebrity you're chasing, one, which is really nice to see, is saying you won't Photoshop me, will you? And others are saying you definitely will. So a lot of women are different. They're driven.
So
in different
the Sarah
ways.
Murdoch thing wasn't utterly unprecedented. It wasn't, you know.
No, and some very intelligent women, like film directors, will say, I don't want to be on a cover, you know, looking like I've been Botoxed. So it depends on the woman, same as life.
Now, you've already said, you know, you've just arrived at Next. You've already said you're going to change things. How are you going to change that particular practice?
Yeah, I am. I mean, Next, there isn't, many countries don't have a magazine like Next. Its ethos is role models, not supermodels, and it's about real New Zealand women. So I feel very strongly that if that's the ethos of the magazine, we have to start showing women as they really are, because we're that sort of magazine. So started with, went on the hunt for someone who would go on the cover for my first issue and wouldn't be photoshopped, and that was interesting in itself. But of course, an actress said yes.
And that was Robin Malcolm. I'll hold this up. So this is exclusive peek at the new cover of Next magazine. Robin Malcolm, utterly unphotoshopped.
She looks beautiful.
She looks great.
It's amazing.
And you know what the funny thing is? She was just recently a new idea, and she's, to put it bluntly, photoshopped a bugger in this, and she looks a lot better there. Is there something to be learned from that?
There absolutely is, and I had a very long text from Robin last night, actually, saying she couldn't wait to see this and how she felt as a woman so much more excited about the images in this magazine that show her as she wants to be seen.
Now, Jo, we looked at the Ruby Higgins thing there
Yeah.
in New Zealand's Next Top Model. You had probably a more extreme version of that the first time we ever saw you on TV in Pop Stars. Was that as hard for you as it looked? Because it looked traumatic.
Obviously, varying sort of weight issues there, because when I was in True Bliss, which was 10 years ago, you know, I moved to Auckland, and the average size of what was considered skinny was like a size 10, maybe a size 8. All the girls in the band were a size 8. I was more like a size, you know, 18. Whereas Ruby, dear God, was a size 8, and then all the other girls were a size 6. Do you know what I mean? She's not exactly what you'd call... She doesn't have a weight issue at all.
Does this suggest that things have gotten more extreme? Because none of those other True Bliss girls were remotely...
I know. Well, this is what I'm saying to you. It's ridiculous. And, I mean, when it happened to me, I never really noticed, because that's who I was, you know. And maybe I was somewhat protected by the people working around us. But you know, yes, I was recognised as the big one. But there were benefits. I was like the big one who was funny, or the big one that could sing well, whereas the other ones were just the cute blonde, you know, the bitchy redhead, you know what I mean? Like, they were sort of just lead on those things, whereas people sort of took it into my personality into account and my talents. They sort of looked past the weight thing. So for me, it was actually an okay experience. I didn't sort of deal with people's issues about my weight until I lost weight. That's when it became apparent to me that suddenly I was being judged on the way that I looked, and suddenly actually people were treating me differently, and I was actually getting more work, but I never noticed before, because that was, you know, I was always
and
big.
you actually made that weight loss thing part of your brand, didn't you? You signed up with Weight Watchers.
Well, I didn't ever really sign with Weight Watchers. It became a situation that sort of was out of my hands, because for years I refused to do any articles after I lost weight, because I didn't want that to become a thing. But then you know, so many women would come to me and say, how did you do it? And almost as though they wanted me to say magic pills, you know, because everyone wanted this sort of secret. And I thought, well, the only way to clear this up is to say, well, it was diet and exercise. I followed Weight Watchers. I never actually signed up. I just followed books and did it myself, you know. It was really me that was like, oh, God, this is bad. I'm putting pressure on myself. It's not, as I say, since I've lost weight, I feel more that people are sort of eyeing me up about it now, you know, when I initially lost weight. It's
interesting that other young women talk to you about it as well. Was it incumbent upon you, do you think, to say the right thing to them and not, you know, say, oh, you have to lose weight, you're fat?
It's so easy to say the wrong thing, though. Honestly, like, oh, it freaks me out. My niece is 4.5, and my brother called up my mum and other family members that live in Wellington and said, you have to be really careful about what you say in front of Hope. And they said, why? And he said, because she stopped eating, because somebody around her said, oh, I can't eat too much or I'll get fat. She's 4.5, so she doesn't know what too much
That's
is.
terrifying, isn't
and
it?
with her limited life knowledge, she doesn't realise that it's not really a serious thing. Women talk like that in front of each other all the time, like, oh, I'm off carbs, carbs are the enemy, you know, oh, God, I'm so fat right now, I drank too much, I ate too much, whatever. But that 4.5-year-old is sponging all that information in, and so she was taking 3 bites of her meal, because in her mind, she didn't know what too much was, and she didn't want to get fat, because she's already seen that fat people get treated differently and, you know, aren't sort of seen as beautiful. And that's what I mean, like, it's so easy to say the wrong thing, whether it's to somebody who's 15 or somebody who's 5 or somebody who's 50. So, I mean, I try to be as honest as possible about my experiences with weight and sort of the healthy things about it. And I even think of myself as sort of an advocate for healthy-sized women. Like, I will never be a size 0 ever. My thigh might be a size 0, but the rest of me is not doing in. But even I find myself, like when I was watching Ruby Higgins on New Zealand's Next Top Model, I remember thinking, in my mind, I was like, I love her, she's gorgeous. But even I was like, oh yeah, she's recognisably chubbier than the others. And then I figured out, well, what's wrong with me? They're size 6 and she's a size 8.
Well, she strikes me as being a wee bit like you, in that she had the talent to, you know.
Well, I think, I've always said this, and this is terrible to say, but I think, you know, women that grow up without being conventionally what would be considered beautiful or thin tend to sort of focus more on other aspects of their personality and develop those things, whereas some women grow up always, everything falls into the bag the right way, and they don't have to work as hard as the rest of us do, you know? And so they don't necessarily develop those things. So, I mean, maybe that's Ruby's thing, although she's nowhere near. I mean, the girl is thin as. She's, you know, but she's obviously got a personality that goes beyond her looks, you know?
Tracy, I know you wrote about that Ralph Lauren image, which is probably one of the more
stunning, wasn't it?
extreme ones you could ever hope to see. I kind of wonder whether it was so extreme that no one could possibly mistake it for anything other than some sort of Frankenstein creation.
Well, I wish that was true, because I actually put it up on the computer and I called over my kids and my partner and said, get a load of this. And my partner actually said, is that Photoshopped? And I kind of went, oh, no. I mean, you know, what was so great is the comment afterwards, I think is a classic, that on the Boing Boing site, which was some guy said, dude, I'm sure his voice must have sounded like
it was a woman, actually. Yeah.
Was that a woman?
Yeah.
Okay, well then her voice might have said, dude, you know, her pelvis is wider than or is narrower than her head. And I think that should be a mantra for our times. You know, not what you can do for your country or I have a dream, but, you know, as I said in the column, you know, the aspiration that we don't have to look like a stick insect that mated with a vacuum cleaner hose on the next cover of Next.
Well, and the interesting thing there was that it was you know, Ralph Lauren himself who responded, and rather testily. It was a man putting pressure on there. I wonder whether that's actually a rarity and it's more often women putting pressure on each other to look this way.
No, I think it's both, actually. I think what's really wonderful that what happened in that case was that Boing Boing, which was the website that first put it up, forgive me for looking at my notes here, they wrote a thing afterwards because Ralph Lauren went after the sites that put it up and tried to close them down with legal notices. And Boing Boing put up the stuff saying, every time you threaten to sue us over this stuff, we will A, reproduce the original, making sure all our readers get a good look at it, B, publish your spurious legal threat with copious mockery so that it becomes highly ranked in search engines, and C, offer nourishing soup and sandwiches to your models. And so what's so gorgeous about that is that nowadays what happens is if some big corporate's going to come charging after you, you can just kind of thumb your nose at it and say, sorry boys, I'm going to put it on YouTube anyway and just watch it go viral. And that's what pulled them in.
On the other hand, Christina, you were at Fashion Quarterly.
That's right.
And I wonder whether there's a simple and fairly practical dimension to this, in that the clothes look better hung on someone who's skinny and has wide shoulders.
Yeah, you can't actually get, unfortunately, a sample. I'm just about to do a size 14 swimwear shoot. I can't find a size 14 sample. You can't get anything other than an 8 or 10 sample, which we have to put pressure on the manufacturers to change. We can't, and it costs anywhere between $3,000 to $7,000 to do a photo shoot like that, so you need to make sure someone can fit the clothes. Now, what a model does, and I can tell you this from having shot for Fashion Quarterly all over the world, they look average in everything. You know, and a model looks average in everything. She's a bit of a stick insect and she looks average in everything, and we need to make that really clear to our young women. She's a coat hanger. What a real woman looks is brilliant in some things. She looks so much hotter and she's so much more beautiful. And we need to make that process really transparent, that it's a commercial reality. It's costing $1,000 an hour. She just needs to fit it and be able to be pegged and look okay. But we need to talk to the girls about those things, and we need to put pressure on clothing manufacturers to make samples that are bigger more available. Fortunately, in New Zealand, models are known as being bigger than models even in Australia and definitely all over the world. Our runway models are far bigger than anywhere, and we need to, and even they're pretty thin, so we need to put a stop right now and say we are never, ever going to go to the 6 and 8s that we're seeing over, you know, in other places.
So how do you manage, Joe, if these clothes don't fit anyone? I mean, you have to get up and perform several nights a week, don't you?
Yes, I do. You know, we just... Like, I'm personally of a mould where I'm not trying to look like a supermodel. In my day, I grew up and there was a definitive line between supermodels who were thin and heroin chic and whatever, and entertainers and movie stars and singers. There was a definitive line between what they looked like. You didn't have to be a supermodel to be those other things. Nowadays, it's a lot different. So the way that I sort of look at it is different to the way that a 14-year-old girl's going to look at it.
So you think it has changed? And why has it changed like that?
Because Hollywood, okay, in the past, you know, when you had Kate Moss come out and she was a size 0, everyone was like, oh, gasp, heroin chic, because you'd have to be taking hard drugs to be that thin. Now, most of the celebrities in Hollywood are a size 0. It is like what people are. I mean, you know things have changed when it used to be triple XL. Now there's triple XS. I remember dying of shock when I saw a double XS. I was like, who's shopping in here? You've got to be kidding me.
12-year-olds.
Actually, Robin Malcolm makes a great point in her interview that it's amazing that before feminism, you know, we had Garbo, we had, you know, May Lorraine Bacall, we had these strong, masculine, hoity images of actresses that we saw in Vogue that were very strong and masculine. But ironically, it's ironic that post-feminism, images of actresses are totally sexualised. You know, when really, arguably, they should be far more in control of their images, and they're actually far more sexualised, and they're expected to be sex symbols as well as talented. And
the weirdest thing is, they used to be sort of, you were talking about those ladies that were sort of masculine-ish in their own way. Now they look like small 12-year-old boys, so it's sort of gone the other scale.
Well, on the note of small 12-year-old boys, I think we'll take a break. And when we come back, we'll consider the relationship between beauty and mere cosmetics.